14 years later, and I'm happy to say that I'm living a pretty normal everyday life. I now go by the name Lisa, and Zachary goes by Brandon. We moved around from place to place for a bit until we finally found somewhere to settle where I thought we'd be safe, and since then, everything has been going well. Thankfully, there's been no sign of the changeling since that dreadful night our father was murdered. But that doesn't mean I've forgotten about it. The thought of it finding us is always in the back of my mind. Of course, in order to keep Zachary safe, I decided to tell him everything about the changeling once I thought he was old enough to understand. He hasn't come right out and said it, but I can tell he doesn't believe anything I've told him, or that it even exists. And that's okay, because luckily he's never gotten to see it, and I pray that he never does. When it killed our parents, he was just a baby, so he doesn't remember what happened. We live a pretty sheltered life here. The house we live in is surrounded by woods way out in the middle of nowhere. Our nearest neighbor lives miles away. I run a small business from home so that I can be here with Zachary all of the time. He's 15 now and absolutely hates the fact that he has to stay home with me and attend cyber school. And he isn't allowed to have friends, but it's for his own good. My husband Tim doesn't understand why I'm so overprotective of him. Yes, that's right, I ended up getting married. Tim and I met when Zachary and I were traveling through Texas. We bumped into each other at a park when I stopped to let Zachary play and get some fresh air. He was jogging down one of the paths and scrolling through his phone at the same time, not paying attention to where he was going. He ended up knocking me to the ground, but he was super apologetic about it and even offered to take us out to dinner. I wanted so badly to decline, but I was running out of money because I'd only been able to do little odd jobs here and there to keep us afloat as we traveled to get as far away from the changeling as possible, so a free meal sounded like music to my ears. I reluctantly accepted, and we made plans to meet up later that day at a small restaurant in town. And we instantly clicked, because as soon as I sat down at the table, I pulled out a pack of gingerbread cookies from the diaper bag to give to Zachary for a snack, and before I could even offer, Tim asked for one, saying that he loves them. Also, he got along really well with Zachary. He didn't even seem to mind that I had a kid. That's right, I've been telling everyone that Zachary is my son. Zachary's the only one who knows the truth that he's actually my brother. So Tim, Zachary, and I all hung out a few more times before I decided it was time for us to move on. Tim was sad to hear that we had just been passing through and were leaving so soon, but then he told me that he wasn't from around there either. He just so happened to be in town visiting some friends. He said he was actually from Colorado and he was flying back home in another week. Colorado sounded like a nice place to me, so that's where we ended up. After dating for 3 years, Tim proposed, we bought a house together, and he's been an amazing father figure to Zachary. I know my dad would be proud. But the problem that we're now having is that Tim wants to have kids of our own. Deep down inside, of course I'd love nothing more than that too, but I couldn't bring myself to have kids knowing that I'll only be putting them in danger. Tim doesn't know about the changeling. I don't have the heart to tell him, knowing already that he'll either think I'm crazy and leave me, or think I'm making up some ridiculous story as a reason not to have children. I've even thought of telling him that I'm unable to get pregnant. I often wonder if maybe all of this could have been prevented if Grandpa had just told us the truth about the changeling, instead of keeping it from us for all of those years. Maybe he would still be here. And Grandma, Shayla, Roger, and my parents too. Not that our lives aren't finally happy now, but Zachary and I could have been living even happier lives. But then when I think about it, I probably never would have met Tim, and I can't imagine my life without him. I let out a deep breath as Tim walks up behind me, wraps his arms around my waist, and kisses me on the cheek. I thought you and Brandon were going to see a movie. I glance at my watch. We don't have to leave for another few minutes. Just then, Zachary comes strolling into the kitchen. Come on, Mom, are you ready? Yeah, just let me go grab my purse. When I return a moment later, I find the kitchen empty. Then I hear voices outside, so I walk over to the window and see Tim and Zachary throwing a football back and forth in the front yard. By the time I lock up the house and head out to the car, Zachary is already sitting in the back seat waiting for me. What are you doing back there? Oh wait, I see. You're too cool to be seen sitting up front with your mom. He smiles. No, Dad just decided that he's going to come with us. I climb in and start the engine just as Tim comes jogging down the driveway and hops into the passenger seat. I was thinking maybe we could go out to dinner after the movie. But I was going to make lasagna tonight, I say with a devilish grin. Tim and Zachary look at each other with a terrified look on their faces. Then a second later, they burst into laughter. We all know that I'm not a very good cook. I missed out on learning how to cook when I was locked up in that crazy hospital. My mom was an amazing cook, and I really wish she could have taught me a thing or two. I usually just buy stuff frozen from the grocery store and then pop it in the oven or microwave. Tim is the chef in our family. It's what he does for a living. He's the head chef at Pepper Tree Restaurant in Colorado Springs. All right, I guess we're going out for dinner tonight. Pulling into the parking lot, I think to myself that the place is pretty crowded for a Wednesday evening. Usually it's the weekend you have to worry about, waiting in the long line at the concession stand and then finding a good seat. We get inside and have to squeeze through a group of people loitering around trying to decide on what movie they want to see. We purchase our tickets and head straight to our theater, hoping to still be early enough to get decent seats. Once we find some that suffice, I take everyone's snack order and head back out to the concession stand. The line looks like it's gotten even longer. I hope I only missed the previews and not the beginning of the movie. As I wait in line, I scroll through my phone reading the news, when suddenly a strange feeling washes over me, causing me to look up. Immediately, I spot a woman standing in another line, waiting to purchase tickets. She's obviously watching me, because her eyes are fixated on my face, her gaze unwavering, following me as the line moves forward. Finally, she must realize I've caught her staring, and she smiles sweetly, then pays for her ticket and walks over to the concession stands, finding a place in line directly behind me. My heart starts to race. All of the reasons why we shouldn't have done this come flooding in. Zachary talked me into taking him to the movies tonight. We usually just rent a movie on demand and watch it at home, but he's been doing so good in school lately, he asked to do this as a reward. How could I say no to that? I reach into my purse and grip my pepper spray bottle filled with the ginger and iron filings concoction I put together and carry with me everywhere, especially for this day that I've been dreading to come for the last 14 years. The cashier calls me forward. What can I get for you, miss? I place my order for popcorn, nachos, and 3 large Cokes. Then I pay and wait for him to get everything together. Just then, my phone rings. It's Zachary. Mom, what's taking so long? The movie's about to start. I'll be right there, I quickly say and hang up, praying that the woman behind me, who I'm fairly certain could be the changeling, hasn't heard any of my conversation. The cashier brings my items over and places them on the counter, so I toss my phone into my purse, grab everything, and then turn to head back to the theater, when to my surprise, I find that there's nobody standing in line behind me. I have no idea where that woman disappeared to, but her presence and odd behavior definitely has put me on high alert. I return to my seat just as the lights dim and the movie begins. But don't ask me what happened during the movie, because I don't remember any of it. I was too distracted on all of the people coming and going in and out of the theater to focus. Afterwards, we drive over to our favorite restaurant in town to have dinner. But I'm not very hungry. My stomach is in knots just thinking about that woman. I can't get her off of my mind. Could the changeling really have found us after all of this time? I'd hoped it just gave up and left us alone to live our life, realizing that we had nothing to do with whatever our grandpa did all of those years ago. Honey? Lisa? Do you know what you want to order? Tim asks, temporarily snapping me out of my daze. I'll probably just get the same thing I always do. Unintentionally, I start drumming my fingers on the table. Each click of my polished nails on the table echoes the tumultuous thudding of my heartbeat. Is everything all right? You've been acting weird ever since we left the movies. I nod my head and take a sip of my soda. When he excuses himself a moment later to go use the restroom, I breathe a sigh of relief. This will give me a second to fill Zachary in on what's going on. As soon as Tim's gone, I whisper across the table. Listen to me carefully. I think we may have a problem. I saw someone while we were at the movies. I'm not certain, but I think they could very well have been the changeling, so you need to be on the lookout for anyone acting strangely. Do you have the pepper spray I gave you? No, I forgot it at home. Damn it, Brandon. Here, take mine, I tell him as I reach into my purse and then hand him my bottle. Just as he takes it from me, he whispers, Dad's coming. I force myself to enjoy the rest of dinner, and Zachary does his best to keep my mind on other things, talking about some girl in his class that he likes. You have a crush on someone? What's her name? He starts to blush. Mom, would you stop? I just said I think she's pretty, that's all. And her name is Allison. We finish dinner, and just as we're leaving the restaurant, I'm still teasing Zachary about the girl he likes, and the door has barely even swung closed behind me when I hear a woman's voice. Thank you, she says coldly. I turn to say you're welcome, but then freeze in fear when I see that same face, this time rigid with tension, that I saw while I was waiting in the line at the concession stand at the movies. Her hand grazes mine as she grabs the door. Lisa, come on, honey, what are you doing? Tim calls from across the parking lot. But before I can make a mad dash for the car, the woman grips my hand tightly. Hello, old friend. I've been looking for you for a very long time. How? How did you find me? I wait for a reply, but get none because the changeling is too busy staring at Tim and Zachary with wide eyes and a look of excitement. And its dull teeth are starting to come to the sharp points that I've come to recognize. Tim sees the look of terror on my face and starts to rush over. Hey, what in the hell are you doing? Get your damn hands off of my wife. But before Tim can even get across the parking lot, the changeling lunges, attacking him. The parking lot, which I hadn't even realized was full of people, floods with gasps and terrified screams. I frantically search the crowd of people, who have now started taking out their phones and are snapping pictures and recording. Then I breathe a sigh of relief when I see that Zachary made it to the car. Now that I know he's safe, at least at the present moment, I race over to where Tim is wrestling with the changeling and attempt to help him. As soon as it hears me approaching, it backhands me so hard that I go flying backwards into the glass doors, causing me to lose my vision for a few seconds. I just lie there on the sidewalk, trembling and covered in cuts, glass, and blood. As I try to catch my bearings, Zachary's frantic screams capture the changeling's attention. You're the one I really want. Then it lowers itself onto all fours and goes charging across the parking lot. Tim steps into its path. Get away from him! The changeling hurls him and he goes flying backwards, slamming into a car 3 parking spaces away from ours. That's when he pulls out his gun and raises it in the air. People start screaming and running for cover. He has a concealed carry permit, and knowing that he carried a gun around with him at all times always made me feel safe. Tim lets off 3 shots, each one hitting its target and ripping through the woman's flesh. She collapses to the ground, her body lying there lifeless. A minute later, Tim gets up and he and another man begin approaching her body. No! Get away from it! The gun isn't enough. You need iron or ginger. Honey, it's all right. Calm down. I just want to check to see if she has a pulse, Tim tells me as he reaches toward her neck. Not even a split second later, the changeling lifts its razor-sharp claws and slits the throat of the man that accompanied my husband over there. I watch in horror as he falls to the ground, bleeding profusely. Tim manages to get off one more shot, hitting it in the leg, but it's not enough. The changeling stabs him right in the stomach. His body slumps right next to the other man's, allowing the changeling to grab a hold of him and viciously bite down on his shoulder. A few more shots ring out, but they do no good, because the changeling has a hold of his arm and the gun is aiming in the air. Mom! Zachary shouts from the car. I turn to look and see that he's thrown something to me. I catch it, and realizing what it is, dart over to within a few feet of the changeling and spray it, not letting my hand off the trigger for anything. It lets out that same ear-piercing, agonizing screech that I remember. as it thrashes around the parking lot, obviously in an immense amount of pain. That's when I see that its skin is starting to burn. It must be the iron fillings that I put in the pepper spray. It makes sure to deliver one final message to me as it screams, running through the parking lot. "Now that I found you, you'll never get away again, you stupid girl. You're all going to die." Then it disappears into the darkness. I dash over to check on Tim. He's not doing good. He's barely breathing and gasping for air. I shout for Zachary to come help me. Then we pull him into the back seat of the car. Afterwards, I leap into the driver's seat and speed away, trying not to hit the last few people left standing around recording on their phones. Tears stream from my eyes. I feel defeated once again. I honestly just want to call it quits. But I know for Zachary's sake I can't. "Put on your seatbelt," I tell him. What in the hell just happened back there? Was that it? Was that the changeling? It was way too strong to be human, Tim manages to whisper from the back seat. "How do you know about the changeling?" "Brandon told me about it." Then Zachary cuts in. "Mom, we have to get Dad to the hospital right away." 8 minutes later, we pull up in front of the emergency room and a team of nurses bring out a gurney to get Tim. Zachary and I sit in the waiting room and a nurse approaches us asking what happened. I explain to her what just occurred, leaving out the obvious details that no one would believe. The next thing I know, the cops show up and start questioning the staff. That's when I decide it's time to get out of here before they can ask us anything. I can't have them finding out the truth about who we are. They'll take Zachary away and put him in foster care, and I'll spend the rest of my life in jail. I drag a protesting Zachary back to the car. "Where are we going?" he questions as tears roll down his cheeks. "I don't know, but we have to get away from here. And we can't go home. We can never go back there again. Obviously, we can't hide from it anymore. Eventually, it's going to find us." "Well, what about Dad? I hope he'll be okay. We can't just leave him. Do you think that's what I want? We have no other choice." He slumps down in the passenger seat and begins to sob. I can't blame him. He just witnessed the attempted murder of the only father he's ever had. And now I've just told him that even if he lives, he'll never be allowed to see him again. "I thought you were lying. All those things you told me, I never believed them. But they were true. Everything you told me was true." I try to comfort him by telling him that everything's going to be okay, even though I don't actually know if it will. I think I know what we have to do now. We have to go back home to Minnesota and see if we can find Grandpa's friend who helped him catch the changeling. He may be the only one who can help us. Don't forget to subscribe for new stories weekly. See you next time on
Nina's Nightmares.
Really? You're supposed to click the like button, not me. Ugh.